This podcast is brought to you by Primary Arms. Primary Arms seeks to provide the best shopping experience for everything firearms. With over 13,000 products from over 400 top brands, Primary Arms carries a complete selection of rifles, handguns, firearms parts, shooting gear, apparel, and more. Every order comes with a commitment to superior service, backed by fast shipping and an expert support team. Primary Arms, serving freedom since 2008. Find out more at frn.deals/PA. Welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This show is for you if you just bought your first rifle or if you've been building them for years. There is something we can all do to take our black rifles to the next level. My name is Nick Dooley, and I am actually joined this week by both of our co-hosts. We have Garth.
Ooh. Hey, yeah, it's been about a month, sorry.
And Tyler.
Hey, everybody.
We are also joined with our special guest tonight, Cody. So how are you doing tonight?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
No, I really love talking to you, and one of these days we're going to talk to you when they're not doing like a crazy assault on our rights.
You wish.
I am a hopeful man.
That's kind of the fun. That's like the way of saying you'll never invite me back.
No, I said one of these days, like one of these times, you can come on when we're not going like, whoa, what just happened?
It's getting faster and faster.
Yep. So obviously, before we get into it, there has been some other news that's interesting this week that we'll get into in just a little bit that kind of goes hand in hand with our topic for tonight. But Tyler, Garth, did you guys do anything cool this week? Or
take it away, Garth.
Yeah, man, nothing gun related. I mean, not like buying or selling or anything like that, but definitely getting the range all beautified for the summer now and stuff. And yeah, it's been exciting. So I can't wait to get to the range and actually pull out some rifles and start, pinging some steel. So that's about my excitement for the week.
Yeah, mine's been full up. Day of 249, day of 240, and a day of M2 machine gun. So we've been really busy. And of course, a couple of days of using the same stuff on Op4. So I've managed to get poison ivy, picked about 5 ticks off me. And I managed to do it all in the 2 hottest freaking days of the summer. So northern Minnesota, 100% humidity, 100 degrees. It was a blast.
Yes. And I'm sure it rained at least one day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were in the middle of everything. And, oh, man, we were like, it just came on so freaking fast. It was like the fob was absolutely destroyed after that. We had trash and all of our camo netting fell down and it was nuts, but there wasn't any tornadoes or anything, just heavy winds and rain.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, I again have done nothing interesting, so I'm still just living vicariously through everyone else and the internet. The most interesting thing I've done this week is something we have to talk about. And that is, I've been watching. If you haven't watched the news this week, and again, this is in the 22nd of June, there was a gun control bill put into the Senate that was done in a very odd way of how the legislature did that, because they took a bill that had already been passed by the House and then gutted it and added an amendment that was the gun control bill and then shoved that through. And that was voted on to go to a full Senate vote tomorrow and then would have to get, ancillary approval by the House, but it's supposed to be a pretty easy rollover for that. And it doesn't have any out and out bans, but it does, incentivize states adding red flag laws by giving the state more money, and you can't get the money unless you do this, which they've done before with drinking ages and highway funding. But that was a fight fought in the 80s, and was lost. But it's when we move into it, we were talking a little bit ago. One of the most interesting and dangerous things for gun owners that happened on that. And keep in mind that I am not a lawyer, and nothing we say should be taken as legal advice. But
absolutely not.
Have to do that preliminary stop for that. But they really broadened the definition of being in the business for profit. And it's if you do anything to make a profit with firearms, like it's pretty much in the business would be buying and selling guns or something like that. The definition in the way it's written now could be viewed as if you buy a handgun, if you buy a firearm and then sell it for more than you paid for it, that's considered making a profit, and you would need an FFL. There's a lot more
down to the gear and the optics and everything else with it, or only the guns itself.
Well, by the way, this is written as a firearm, but I cannot speak to one way or the other because I wouldn't think it would be for optics and accessories and all those things that you don't need an FFL to run. It would be for firearms, and it's hey, I bought this. Like right now, there is someone who owns a Remington R-51 that can sell it for more money than they paid for it because it's now a history piece, not because it works.
They're modifying Title 18, 921, how the ATF says whether you're in the business or not. So that's for purposes of like the GCA. Like, okay, are you selling firearms and should you have an FFL, or are you just a private seller that shouldn't have an FFL? And for years they've just wanted to say anybody who touches private sales should have had an FFL, retroactive. So they're saying they're taking the definition that used to say in the business meant it's your livelihood and there's some profit, and now they're saying just if you make a profit, therefore ATF has the power to scrutinize it. So yeah, it potentially means all private sales of firearms.
But then is it per gun or per business? Because you can buy a gun for $500, sell it for $700, and make $200. But over the course of the year, through buying and selling and business expenses, you can technically break even, or even have a.
So that's the old way of thinking about it. It's kind of bureaucratic definition with this has this customary idea. Well, principal objective of livelihood and profit. It implies this kind of ongoing process. People know you're in the business. Now they're saying if predominantly for profit, you sell a firearm. Okay, yeah, they want you to at least think that could mean I've sold a gun one time. I did it for profit. Therefore, they certainly want you to think that.
Sure.
Yeah, and it very much so kind of paves the way for them doing their universal background checks and things that they want to push for with that. Because as they move forward with it, it's written in a very ambiguous way to leave that open for interpretation. It'll have to get challenged in the courts later to see exactly what being in the business is. If it's just somebody who, bought a gun and sold it for more money, yep, they made a profit on it. They're in the business. Versus like what you were saying, Tyler, if you're breaking even where you're selling it back and forth, that's still kind of, it's being a business or more than just a collector.
It's a good thing I always take losses when I sell my guns.
Yeah. They're saying actually, you can sell as many guns as you want as long as you lose money.
I'm fine then.
Yeah. So thanks, Congress. No, Julie, your point is really good there about obviously this is another way of thinking of the meta years. Yeah, they've chipped away toward universal background checks, and some judge will eventually, or a bunch of judges will interpret this to mean, of course, all private sales are covered by 921 Title 18, and then therefore when you modify the background check stuff, it'll all just link up. So they don't even necessarily ever have to accomplish it in one big lift. Maybe they're hoping this will kind of send us that way.
Yep, it's a definite another chipping away at a indelible right, because.
And so that's the thing. Like Cornyn, right? You saw Cornyn yesterday. He's like, I protected the Second Amendment, and I'm sure you guys saw that he got booed at this GOP thing in Texas. And it's like the gall just in this one sentence in this 80-page thing where he expands the ATF's power. Essentially the administrative state covered in this bill all private sales of firearms in the country. That's the largest growth of ATF's power I can think of in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's an one, an insane overreach, but two, like that really is, and that's one of the things I get kind of worried about is looking at those private sales and doing all of the other things, because as some people do not realize, there is no official national firearms registry yet, and that when they move into universal background checks, then that becomes far more easier to supplement it on the back door. And there are trace requests and things of that nature that FFLs do, but there are several things about this that can be very troublesome and worrying for the gun owner.
Absolutely. It's give an inch, take a mile kind of thing. Like everybody's on board with, more security for schools and everything. But once you start taking away bit by bit, they're going to realize that gun control doesn't work. And you give a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And I don't think they're ever going to be satisfied. So it's just a slippery slope that if we don't take the stand now, it's not going to stop.
No, and I don't care what anyone in political power says. In the Revolutionary War, they had privatized warships, and if we went by how it was when the Second Amendment was written, I should be able to own a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier.
Yep.
But
I don't have years and you'll be there.
I don't have that kind of money. But so if you're, that's something that everyone needs to be aware of and be looking into it. If you listen to it now before, Friday on the 24th, when they're going to be voting on it, because they want to vote, either Thursday or Friday, make sure everyone's getting involved and calling their senators, calling the representatives, even if they live in have a kind of a pro-gun Democrat senator, make them realize, hey, this is not what we want. And that's the only way to get in front of beat this is by being annoying to your public officials.
Mm-hmm.
So they're elected officials. But that is enough of the Debbie Downer news for right now. And one thing that this kind of pairs into very nicely is our guest that we have on tonight is with Defense Distributed. So Defense Distributed is a interesting company because they offer a couple things. I know I've worked with DefCAD doing some stuff before, and then they have Ghost Gunner, and one other thing I am not familiar with, and that is the Legio. I don't know how to pronounce that. Legion.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change it to ghostguns.com, and you can just join ghostguns.com. And people will be like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I get what that's about. That Legio thing is all like, I don't know. I just wanted the name for the membership. I'll change it all up. But right now, yeah, you got to join our membership thing if you want access to certain, like the DefCAD or support, stuff like that.
Yep. And I think that's one of those things where I signed up and did the thing and then coming back, looking at it, I'm like, what's this? Oh, yeah, that's that thing I joined.
I'm so retarded, man. But I'll figure it out in the end. If you hang around long enough, you finally figure it out.
Yep. Yeah. So let's start out with, what is Defense Distributed? Who's Cody? Give us the rundown.
Damn. Well, so DD is coming up on 10 years now, and we organized to 3D print guns. At the time, we were going to bill it as like the first 3D printed gun. And more or less, we got that credit for doing that. Do I really think we 3D printed the first gun? No, I don't really think that, because it ended up being so easy to do.
And you made it mainstream, though.
Yeah, we at least popularized 3D printing guns as a political idea or as something, for our culture of some significance. And we did it in a way that we styled it as, in opposition to the Obama administration and the attempt to ever really get meaningful control over our culture, because we did it with the background of the Sandy Hook shooting. And now we've had this Sandy Hook redux with this Uvalde thing. And I don't know if you guys want to get into that. So everything old is new again. every major school shooting gives you an opportunity to make these presentations. So that's kind of how we got on the scene. And then really ever since then, we've just developed other technologies like the Ghost Gunner CNC and really anything we could do to kind of commercialize or anticipate what would help the home gun builder in this space.
All right, I'm going to answer one question there from the comments quick that I just popped up on screen. And this is something that's been going around a lot in the industry that we should have touched on a little bit earlier too. And that is with Winchester stopping 223 ammo to civilians from Lake City. That has not been confirmed. I know that I want to say it was Truth About Guns or someone ran a story about it and everyone kind of picked it up and ran with it. How that Lake City plant works, because they're talking about 855. This is something that is interesting where when the Lake City plant is owned by the government, operated by a company to manufacture firearms, and they have they're not firearms, they manufacture ammunition. And what they would do is they would use the equipment there, operate the plant, and then they were just the one who had the bid to get the materials and produce this ammunition, and they would occupy that ammunition plant. And the Lake City plant produces a lot of things. It produces 50 cal, 7.62 by 51, 308, all those types of things, as well as 5.56, and the big one was 8.55. With that being stated, they were going to, what they would do historically was do large overruns of the government contract and then sell that ammunition later, to the civilian market as their overrun. And one thing to keep in mind when they're talking about doing that, the Army switched to 855A1 instead of standard 855. And I have never seen 855A1 available for civilian sale, unless it's some that fell off the back of a truck that somebody's selling on Gunbroker.
Mm-hmm.
And while this is something to watch, it's not quite 30% of the 5.56 market like people were saying. So this is not something to go run and buy all the 855 in the world, because right now Federal is selling a ton of it. And you also have all of the other countries' imports that are built to spec. And M193 would be another one, but this only affects 855, which the military is transitioning out of because they had to switch to a green bullet. And that's why they went to the 855A1, because that has a lead-free bullet. That's my soapbox about that.
Essentially, that plant is making primarily military ammunition, and regardless of whether you're an ammunition factory or a firearms manufacturer or a gear supplier, if you have military contracts, the military contracts come first. Number one, from a business standpoint, and number two, they actually write that in the contract. So traditionally, because they do the overruns, they can significantly drop the price because you're manufacturing a higher quantity. Therefore, it allows them to basically skim those bullets off the government contract. I mean, you're still fulfilling the contract, but it's increasing your profit margins. And yeah, I'm guessing just because that particular bullet cannot be sold to the civilian sector, they're right now concentrating on fulfilling their military orders. Is that a good way to put it, Dooley?
So what you guys are saying is panic buy. Panic.
No.
No,
Who let you out of the tractor?
I don't know. I'll just go back to meeting myself.
I would still say it's worth examining, because it was Larry King, I think, broke the story. I mean, at least from the direction I saw it. And so this is NSSF putting the word out, saying it's highly sus. And then it certainly mirrors what Obama tried to do with Green Tip in a more formal way, 10 years ago. So I still think it's worth.
Oh, it is worth looking at and keeping an eye on. I do know that Winchester has said that they have not been informed of that. It was an idea that they were tossing around. That was the administration was tossing around. But again, I look at it now as someone who, is a user of that ammunition, and I know that there was a kind of a shortage of that 855A1 projectile for a while, and that's what they're really going to be pumping out, because even training rounds are going to that, which now that we're switching to 277 Fury, it'll be another whole thing. But
Oh yeah.
that's again, we're gonna get back into talking about, Ghost Gunner and 3D printed guns. The fun stuff.
Oh yeah. So started with 3D printing, and where'd you go from there?
Very quickly I ran into the wall. Like I got in trouble with the State Department, Obama's State Department. So we put the first 3D printed guns up on the internet, and they weren't up there very long until we got in trouble. And so then we had to figure out how to get out of trouble, which is not easy to do. And then that we also couldn't keep sharing 3D printed guns on the internet. So they were trying to kind of stop the culture at its root, So we had to come up with a theory for how to fight back and how to make sure that this stuff could be on the internet. They were using old 1990s style reasoning to, like Oklahoma City bombing regulations from the State Department. I'm really oversimplifying. They were using the ITAR. Maybe a lot of people have heard of the ITAR now.
ITAR is International Trade of Arms, and I said it one time and I got the R wrong in it on the show when I was explaining what ITARs meant.
Regulation.
Yep.
Yeah, regulation.
Yep.
So they're part of the USML, the regulations that enforce the USML, and all dual use and all kinds of other, especially sub 50 cal weapons are on the schedules of the USML, and they're regulated for export because they usually have a military use. But ever since Bush, the first year or the first administration of Bush 2, they've been trying to modernize USML and do what they called export control reform, where they would take all munitions up to 50 cal and basically just call them light arms and bring them to the Commerce Department. Anyway, in the middle of all this, they decided, all the technical data related to all these ITAR controlled munitions, that's also controlled. Therefore, the files are controlled. Therefore, blueprints are controlled. But this was like an improvisation on their part. They didn't really know what argument to make. They just kind of shot from the hip and made this argument. And so we did the only thing we could do, which is to take them at their word and then challenge that regulation on the First Amendment basis, basically. So for 10 years, basically, I've taken the State Department to court, federal court, over this First Amendment question. At times, I have won, but there's never really been a final judgment. That's how crazy this whole thing is. And along the way, I've built a lot of technology, commercial technology, in the gun space to allow me to continue to fund this type of litigation.
Yep, I know that right around the same time that happened, there was a big push on ITARs, even with like firearms trainers, and like putting videos up on YouTube or how to work on stuff with gunsmithing, because they tried to change it from technical data, which was was thought of at the time when it was written as like an engineering diagram or something like that, to be shipped out of the country so someone could build something, which then went into an idea or a theory or like doctrine almost.
That's a really good philosophical point. Yeah, like basically this Cold War idea, which was very strict and about very specific listed munitions, ended up becoming about kind of everything connected to them, and then even the information and the manuals related to them. And maybe this is because of the Cold War. Maybe this is bureaucratic inertia, or I don't tend to take a neutral view of it. I think it's very useful for inflating the administrative state and basically contaminating everything in our culture and saying it's directly controlled and therefore can't make it onto the internet. But you would end up with these. I've heard crazy ITAR stories over the years, like, okay, a cleaning kit, let's say for an AR-15 BCG or something. If you sell that cleaning kit with like Q-tips, the Q-tips are ITAR controlled, and you have to get like an export license to send the Q-tips out of the country. Like the Q-tip itself, if you were to mail it without this permission, would give you like 20 years in prison, for example. This is not a joke. This is what the ITAR is and has done, and it ended up infecting, even blueprints, which freely trade on the internet. Everyone knew they did. So the State Department found itself in this impossible situation, trying to regulate basically the last 20 years of gun culture on the internet. It already made it there without anyone realizing it.
Yep, and I just remember like that going on because I was in the trainer space more so than the rest of it at the time, and that was a very big thing. Looking at it of we all like can I put this on the internet? Can you not? Like, oh, looking at these, is this going to get me in trouble? Do you have to limit where you can watch it? And that was, that was one of the reasons why, like, even YouTube went through and was going, oh, they're going to pull content down, and they've claimed that was a background reason for it, was ITAR's violations in the past.
See, I just don't get that. At the end of the day, it's ideas, right? Whether it's blueprints or how-tos or whatnot, it's just ideas. It physically takes the act of somebody doing something that's illegal, and I would argue that a lot of the stuff isn't even legal. So it's crazy that they would be able to pull up 1980s regulations to try and fight that.
And you're right. These were last. Finally, the ITAR was modernized to handle some of this, like in 2019. But before that, yeah, these regs hadn't been updated since the 80s, so they don't even talk about the internet. They don't even understand that the internet is a possibility in a technical sense, and so it's laughably outdated in its thinking. And in a sense, like Dooley, you mentioned, like YouTube used it as an excuse. But you were right to use that word excuse because it was only that. We know that YouTube is aligned with, basically, it's an organ of the government. It's an organ of the culture. And they hadn't, in 2013, when we did this, they didn't have the grammar yet for how and why they wanted to keep gun stuff off the internet. Now it's just a part of YouTube policy. It's a part of the pressure groups, Everytown, Giffords, everybody. They don't, in the name of public safety or community norms, they don't want people to know how to disassemble their fucking gun or whatever. They don't need to use ITAR as an excuse. They just needed that stopgap for a few years while they formulated this idea of how they attack our culture in its, in the new decade on the internet after Obama. They have that now. They have that theory, and Facebook, YouTube, all the Google, these are all now in service of this idea of suppressing, eventually even this podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's where I know that where the network we're on has some stopgap measures just in case they ever would come through with that. The owner of the network has developed some software technologies to make it where you can still find it and it'll still go out even if other places aren't willing to do some hosting. And that's part of the reason why when we get into this, putting things out on the internet and where people are putting it this, for your rights, we shouldn't have to put it this way. But in the immortal words of Serenity and Firefly, you can't stop the signal.
That's true today. But look, we've seen impressive strides in in tech monopoly suppression. Like at my last SHOT Show, a guy came by. He's like, "Hey, I was the guy at Facebook who was told to black hole your page, your links, and they literally have a tool at Facebook called Black Hole." And so if it's about, let's say it's about the AR-15 podcast, if they choose to black hole you, literally no one can link to you, can talk about you, can't message about you. I mean, this is like an incredible technique of suppression. This is like even more sophisticated than, that 1984 stuff. And it's in service every day. We've seen it during COVID. We saw it after January 6th. I mean, this is now considered to be a function of, Silicon Valley, and the government asks for it every chance they get on every topic they get. So we're looking at the 8 ball,
Yep, very much so.
I guess another point there is like the First Amendment suddenly becomes not like the complete solution here. So like, yeah, I've been working 10 years to get like the federal court, or the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to recognize, the First Amendment protects 2D or 3D gun plans. That shouldn't be too hard of a thing, right? You would think, but even in the end, it's probably not enough because Google, Twitter, Facebook, they've all kind of made up their minds what they think about it already. We know what they think about it. So the fight will certainly continue.
Yeah, the fight will never stop. That's for sure. And I don't think anyone will ever stop coming for guns or gun rights and things of that nature because, well, there's a reason why some people don't want, unarmed or they don't want armed peasants. But
no, armed peasants are never a good idea. Again, really, like your language here is really good, right? Like this is about a ruling class versus a peasant class, and that's we can dress it up and like big words about democracy and stuff, but no, it's really about power. It's always about power. And Facebook, YouTube, all these places, they're aligned with power. We are aligned with basically the people or salus populi or something. We're aligned against this power. So, we run a site called DefCAD to basically, no matter what, still be able to get the files to people. Not that we're the only ones doing this. Obviously, you can find a ton of the files on Odyssey and Cult and all these other places, but we run the platforms the way we do in a way to always front run the feds, to front run state governments like New Jersey, New York. There are many states in this country now. Like New Jersey, we say like you can't even possess. We were talking about how outrageous this gun bill is that Cornyn is looking at, but already in like New Jersey State, you can't physically possess or otherwise possess 3D printed gun files unless you have a federal firearms license in the state of New Jersey. All right, that's been the law there since 2018, and I've been fighting them in court that long, and still I have not won.
Yep, that's one of those where like they even had a law against hollow point ammunition for a while in New Jersey. And
sure, there's no gun law they don't like, right? And it's like, okay, it's going to take a long time to turn these things over. And I've been sued by New Jersey. I've sued New Jersey. I've been pulled into Chancery Court, State Court in New Jersey. It's like, whoa. Each of these state laws or each of these states thinks that they by themselves can hit you on federal questions when the feds don't. And that's just that state, man. I was looking at New York State was going to ban files earlier. A guy introduced a bill in session before June 2nd. And it's like, slowly, each of these little states is going to try to be these little tyrannies that won't even let people, find the data or have the data. It's pretty.
Let me ask a question. How can they ban files when there are so many cloud-based storage systems? Like, I understand you could say like, hey, if there's a file physically on a hard drive, but if you're able to, say your business operates out of Texas, you put a file on your Google Drive or whatever you use. I mean, you can fly to New Jersey or wherever and have instant access to that without physically having it on your computer. How do they justify that?
Yeah, perfect question, perfect facts, by the way. It's the ideal hypothetical because that's what happened to me. My servers are in Texas, right? All right, my files are on a server in Texas, let's say. Well, if someone from New Jersey can access the server or can even see that they're advertised, by the way, that's a felony for me to have allowed that to happen. Okay, that's how New Jersey wrote the law. So it's not even just a crime for you to get the file. It's a crime for me to have allowed you to access it from Texas. So then they send cease and desist letters and stuff to your service providers, in other states, and then they sent cease and desist to me in Texas. That actually allowed me to sue New Jersey and Texas, keep them here. I took Graywall, the AG of New Jersey, to the Fifth Circuit in August of last year. I actually won. And I maintained jurisdiction over him just because that's how insane his law is, that they were trying to reach into other states and knock them around this way. Just one state, one petty tyranny of 50 that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, and the smaller the kingdom, the bigger the tyrant is the way that generally goes. And
I agree with you. It doesn't work. Even they seem to know that it's insane and it won't work. And it's going to be someone's job each time to, I don't know, have to run through that wall, and pick all the crap out of their face.
So do you have a background in law or anything, or are you going to have like an honorary degree by the end of this?
I would say at this point I have a background, yeah. But your question is probably, I went to law school for a couple of years. I went to UT Law, and that's kind of where I got my start. Like I dropped out to print guns.
Oh, very cool.
Before that was a thing you could do, and so people are like, "What the hell are you doing?" But now it's if it's not a vocation, it's at least like a style, Lots
hell yeah. So how is this potential bill that's coming? What do you see the repercussions, or how do you see Ghost Gunner and Defense Distributed being affected or reacting to it?
You mean Cornyn's bill, the Senate bill?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, an example, like the House bill that they emptied out to pour their Senate language into. That House bill actually did ban the Ghost Gunner. I would invite you to go check it out.
Specifically by name.
Well, no, because they're better than that. They're smarter than that. So, they know they can't just ban a mill by name. Although, why not? Why couldn't they? But the route they take is to say, well, any mill whose primary purpose is advertised to make firearms, it shall be illegal to possess that mill. Okay, that's about me. That's about Ghost Gunner. And they've tried that language. I can tell you that language is by Everytown or Giffords because I've seen that language pop up in state bills. and proposed House bills for a few years. And so California, by the way, is probably going to actually be the first state to pass this language. In January, I think they're going to ban, again, like any machine tool that's advertised for primarily finishing firearms. Okay, that's banning the ghost gunner in California. And, you know, I'm gonna have to sue. You know, I guess I might as
Well,
well.
I know it doesn't affect you, but like that even affects like a Grizzly gunsmithing center.
Well, dude, what do you mean? It does affect me. What do you mean?
No, I said it affects you, but it also affects. I go, it doesn't just affect you. It like even like some of the Grizzly gunsmithing lays because they're advertised for finishing firearms. It's
You
not
know what?
just you.
That's a good point. I'm gonna write that down. 'Cause I didn't know about that. You send that to me. Like, I'll need that in my exhibits. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, like that, the language I see is like, and it may be a little bit more specific. It's like, well, if the mill is advertised for primarily finishing firearm, you know, unfinished receivers, you know what I mean? It's like it's specific, but not specific enough. And so I'm going to go check that out. In fact, let me write that down right now. I've already been prepping for this case in California because, you know, they start in July, they ban 80% receivers in this unique way. Are you guys watching the California stuff?
I have been just to keep up because they always try and use California as a testing ground for the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's definitely a difference now between East Coast and West Coast approaches to ghost guns, you could say. Where the East Coast is just straight up like we ban in all forms, you know, unfinished receivers, they're gone, it's illegal, we can't possess, can't even have the files. And California, you know, they got early to regulating it, right? The first 80% receiver regulation was about, okay, fine, you can do it, but you got to put a serial number on it. This was in like, I don't know, 2017, I think.
yep.
It went into effect in 19, if I remember, or 18. And then now the precursor parts bills just define 80% receivers or unfinished receivers as precursor parts. So they have to be sold with a serial number now. But interestingly, they don't, you know what I mean? Like they're not banned. You just have to like keep putting numbers on things and
More hoops to jump through.
it's kind of weird. And then, you know, in January or in 23, I forget exactly when, then California is going to regulate additional components like barrels, slides, other what they call major components as precursor parts. And again, those things will all require California specific serial numbers.
Interesting.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like, what, you know, just ban it, dude. Like, what do you mean?
Well, with all the stuff California does, is they're the sole reason why Glock still produces the Glock Gen 3
Yeah.
is because it's approved for sale in California on all their models, so they will always produce it so they can sell guns in California.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to think that way myself, right? Like I want to probably get into this precursor parts business because, well, there's going to be certain 3D kits which can only be built in certain ways in California. Therefore, I guess you need, you know what I mean? You need to dance the dance. It's just, I don't think California understands that that's the consequence. But then again, they've been doing this for so long, and maybe they do.
So why can't you just make because there are a lot of companies out there who make California compliant, like guns, for example, and put a few different, type like the vertical pistol grip with the, the paddle, or whatever the hell they call it, the fin. Can you just make a California compliant ghost gunner, however, that is advertised solely for the machining of coffee mugs?
Yes. Okay. You're thinking exactly right about this. So that is, in fact, I don't want to say too much about it because I'm going to be in court.
Sorry.
That's what we're going to do. I'm going to keep selling the machine in California.
Well, yeah, because the whole thing these days is what, you look at what they did to Remington, they look at what's going on with Daniel Defense now. They're not really targeting the weapon; they're targeting the marketing.
Oh,
so it's their new strategy.
About this, yes. So the wider approach now, and hopefully Daniel Defense will stand that fight because Remington ran away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they had to, right? I get it; they were in bankruptcy or whatever. But the gun people know, or the anti-gun people know that, okay, fine, we'll pierce the placa, and we'll do it with these really bizarre consumer fraud statutes in each state. Okay, Daniel Defense is in trouble there. Maybe not as much trouble as Remington was in because maybe no one can use a Connecticut statute to get to Daniel Defense, but they have to stand up and keep the placa. But my problem here is that if you're a ghost gun company, the placa probably doesn't protect you anyway because technically you're not selling firearms.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say is even looking at that, you have, now we've been talking a lot about 80%. You have 0% that you offer as well.
Oh yeah,
And,
dude.
You know, it's when it comes to the when are you gonna what is a block of aluminum?
Oh man, and there was so much salt when we launched the Zero. But here's the thing: when you look at these state laws now, because a lot of state laws were anticipating like the new ATF rule on receivers to actually ban 80% receivers. Newsflash, they don't. This new rule this federal rule, which goes into effect in just 60 days, looks like it only really bans the polymer 80 kit and polymer pistol receivers.
Yeah, that's really what they went after hard. And I know that when I read the initial one, that it was you could still have a polymer 80 and you could still buy the polymer 80 frame. You just couldn't buy it and the jig in the same package.
That's a fair reading of when it came out. Now they since explained more in Atlanta, like a couple months after they published, and they basically said there's never going to be polymer 80% receivers again, with or without jigs. So it's like, okay, fine, but like metal receivers survive. All these receivers survive, which I wasn't anticipating. I thought it was all going to go away. So we developed 0% receivers on the machine, just as a proof that like, okay, our machine can still hang around, and we can go deeper, and we can standardize around basically firearms from unfinished, just raw material. What's interesting though is like, okay, fine, metal 80s will still be around federally, and now the real players in this space constricting people are state governments, because these state governments actually did go and ban 80% receivers in a lot of places. I'm thinking of Connecticut, and New York did in April. Illinois did, Maryland did, a bunch of states did just very recently. And in those states, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who can sell you an unfinished receiver kit now, because the 0% receivers do not get captured by the law. They don't anticipate that this was possible.
Yep. And the interesting thing to me about it is, like, if you go back, the 80% like ruling on it and what makes an 80% receiver versus 100% receiver, and it's substantial time to complete. Like when they did that, like 80% is a colloquialism that we like put on ourselves rather than what an actual, like, this is how much time you have to spend for it to be an 80%. It's an easy way for us to say that, but the actual like time you have to have in tooling or how much work goes into it is not the same across the board.
Right. In essence, this is why it works. And the meta for me, I think it's easier to explain it like this is why it sucks to not have real state governments, to not have a real federal government. Basically, it's the same pressure groups writing all the laws for everybody. And so they just copy pasted, some federal standards. Like in most cases, it's a definition of unfinished receiver, which means a component which is, at the critical stage of manufacture, or is readily convertible, or is readily modifiable, blah, blah, blah. But they go out of their way to say, it's obviously not a raw piece of material. Well, then, you fucked up. Sucks to not have government. Sorry, try again.
Yeah, and that's one where, it's like 80% AK flats, because even though this is the AR-15 podcast, or as was pointed out by one of our listeners on YouTube, when I typed it in, I fat fingered, and it's the AR-25 tonight. But it's, in going through that, like doing some of those receivers are, fairly easy. Like an AK flat, you can make an AK out of a shovel, and it's a straight up a sand shovel. You can bend that piece of iron or stamped steel into an AK receiver. You could do it with like a probably an old Scorpion, or I could go down the list and the rabbit hole there. But that's where some of the 3D printed guns come in, where I know I've shot a Mac Daddy before that was a 3D printed lower that takes Glock mags and AR fire control groups. Mm-hmm. That you put an AR grip on, like one of the ones from VZ Grips. VZ Grips unique grip angles have 17-degree grip angle that has a interesting texture that doesn't get slippery when it is in mud, blood, sweat, anything like that. It remains tactile because it is machined from a solid block of G10. And G10 is great for all of those things. They have a variety of textures and colors available from mild to wild. And they have 1911 checkered grip panels and those for my beloved Berettas as well. So check out VZ Grips, vzgrips.com, and use the code AR15 podcast for your 10% discount.
And you knew that cold. I just shot a Mac Daddy for the first time at our last range day, so that was just like a week or two ago for me, and very smooth, man, very nice.
Yep, and that's a 3D printed gun, and I know where they got the files.
There's a few places to get them, I'll tell you that. We got to try to keep it that way. But
yep, and because one other thing that would be interesting to talk about, I don't remember if the last time you were on we talked about it, but the makers match that they had last year, and I think that has done a lot for the 80% market because it's starting to get recognized by bigger name people and the industry as a whole.
There's a makers match this year too. So they've done it 2 years in a row now. Yeah, JSD is a sponsor. Polymer 80 was a sponsor, as I recall. And the standards there were pretty good. I guess we can thank Pinkas, for kind of standardizing there. But it was a clean match. And then, the categories made some sense too. Like, okay, there's certain hybrid builds, or there's mostly printed builds, or there's, rifle versus pistol. So, we're seeing incentives for people to prove, what designs are the most efficient or effective. And, that guy Durwood, the designer Durwood, he proved himself very capable. Most of the winning entrants this year, I think, ran some kind of Durwood build of some kind, like a KC9, for example.
Yep.
It's interesting, right? It's another dimension of assessing kind of where the progress of 3D guns is going. And I have nothing but good news to report. But like you said, we can thank 80% receivers for this. The problem is 80% receivers are now the victim of their own success. The Polymer 80 company was so successful that it couldn't avoid, scrutiny from state, municipal, governments. Pressure groups or whatever. Their last gasp, dude. I just read their filings here in Texas. They're the first to sue Joe on his new rule, which makes sense. But in their filings, they admit, they're like, look, if this rule goes through, we're out of business. And it's true. All Polymer 80, all Polymer type receivers, they'll be gone. And 3D printing will be the only thing left. Yeah, there's new 3D printers. Maybe it won't always take 15 hours to make a Glock lower, but that's a real step backward, going from like 30 minutes to multiple hours.
Yep.
Well, I remember I bought a Polymer 80 to build it, to try it once, and because I bought a Glock frame to learn how to stipple on it, and it was a complete frame with full parts. So I had one sitting there, and I went, Brownells had them on sale or something. So I did it, in my basement with a DeWalt cordless drill and a pair of side cutters. And, that was, okay, yep, this is not a hard thing to do.
Yep, I remember that. You tried to get me on the bandwagon, and I totally missed out.
Stippling, man, that's where it's at. There's good tech. There's money to be made, no doubt. And when we first started up ghostguns.com and other places, we found there was a secondary market there of selling off, Glock, regular serialized Glock frames, let's say, to stipplers and other people. So it's a nice little business. But I don't know that this is exactly topical, but I think it's like, let's say, file it under unintended consequences. If Polymer 80 type receivers are truly going away, I think I've seen the first signal of another consequence. And I was just on Alibaba the other day, and I saw Polymer 80 frames basically, and they were listed as like toy Glock. So the Chinese are just going to keep shipping us toy components, for the engineers in Baltimore. Or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be the next Glock auto sear from.
Yeah. It's basically Chinese policy to make sure that we keep having these. So thanks, China.
Yeah, no shit, right?
And that is the first time that's ever been said here.
No kidding.
Yep. But
blown away. I was like, well, okay, that's going to keep happening. Then.
so we've successfully done about 700 rabbit holes, which I appreciate, and this has been a really awesome discussion. But let's get back to the Ghost Gunner, because we've talked about it a lot, and specifically what it is. I mean, if anybody doesn't know, it's a tabletop CNC machine, and it's one that anyone can run. You don't need to have special outlets or anything like that. It is all just a plug it into the computer and you can be in business pretty much, if my understanding is correct.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's basically built to be a gunsmithing toolbox. I mean, we're even working on like a lathe attachment. So it's a horizontal mill. The idea is without coolant, performing pocket milling on the most commercial of the 80% receiver platforms. I don't know the easiest way to say that, but over the generations though of this machine, we've basically developed a tool which can do a number of other things like engraving, skeletonizing, serialization. We have these software called the Ghost Rider. We have lots of third-party companies that make more exotic work holding. We do steel and RMR cuts. And
and for anybody looking, I have the website up, and you can see where there is those. Apparently, it won't let me. Oh, I'd opened up a new window. That's why it didn't go through. It says clicking on some of the engravings to show the different things that it can do with skeletonizing and things of that nature.
Sure, it's just a programmable mill. And I know this guy's like spam or whatever, but yeah, hell yeah, like Iraq, what's not to like? So
I think that's probably one of the coolest things you guys did. You took an existing platform or an existing product that you had, which was intended to do lowers, and then you just kept, you got it on the market and you expanded it into allowing it to do so much more capabilities. I mean, that skeletonizing, that's really cool. I mean, you could even do that to an already existing frame that you have, correct? You don't necessarily have to do 80%.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this is just a fully programmable mill.
Yeah.
It's built on an already existing body of open source standards and controllers, like the Arduino microcontroller, for example. So we wanted to build an open source tool because 3D printed guns start from this open source place, and that's like a necessity. That's vital to this culture, right? Because the strictures of intellectual property and government control basically tried to strangle this culture in its crib, and so it's just like an aspect of what we do now to not patent the machine, to not control it, to not lock you out of the software. Everything's available on GitHub. Everything's programmable. You can take it off road. You can customize it. We endorse third-party versions of our platform. There used to be this project called Ghost Gunner Flex, which is just a cheaper version of our machine. We don't necessarily support it, but what we're saying is like none of that is a threat to this to us or this space, because we want people to really bring their own wisdom back into the platform and then try to commercialize it. So this thing is up to the community to make of it what they can, and then we will officially support those best ideas and fold them back into the project.
Yeah, and one of the other cool things about it is you can do AR-15s with it. You can do an AR-10 with it. You can do a 1911.
Polymer 80 frames.
Oh, look, you name it. Yeah. I wish I was better at, in 2021, we finally pushed out folded AK receivers, for example, with the Post. Although I think folded AKs may not make it past Joe's rule, even though I've talked about how great Joe's rule is. Like we're trying to pilot a new class of techniques for zeros, what we call 0% receivers. Right now, we've only got that for AR-15, but of course, use your imagination, right? 0% will apply to a lot of things. I don't think I'm even spoiling anything. The next place we're going is pistols, because there will be a gap in the market if polymer 80s truly are banned. So like we're just trying to serve where we know there's a gap in the market, where we know there's appetite to make something from nothing, to not have numbers, and because it is still legal in virtually every state to have no serial numbers on a gun if you make it yourself.
Yes, and there's long been a debate about like people building ARs, right? And it's, oh, did you build that AR? And I've seen guys who think building an AR is buying the completed lower and the completed upper off of PSA, and they're like, builder.
Yeah.
Gunsmith.
So.
Two boxes.
Yeah, and then there's the this gives you just that more intimacy with the firearm of building it yourself, and I mean, it's not quite hammering out a receiver in a cave in Afghanistan, but it's still you're taking ownership and you made it, and you're more attached to it because
you can customize it even more.
Oh yeah.
I've seen
when it fires, it's something you built, and when it doesn't, the only person you can blame is yourself. So
that's right. I've seen deep, costume or even cosplay levels of customization where like Deviant Olive comes to mind. He built, a totally spec or period like 1970s, basically a Vietnam era AR. You guys are the Spurgs. You'll tell me the type of model he built. I don't remember what he built, but he was able to, get it down to refine his lower with the Ghost Gunner. And same thing with 1911 builds I've seen. You can do a lot of work, a lot of special custom work on the machine if you want.
Yeah, and that's just awesome to have that, especially kind of as you were saying with that open source where, it's, hey, we're building this is, and then the other communities like DefCAD and stuff like that, and files getting loaded into that and back, and just the knowledge transfer back and forth for how all of those things work is invaluable.
I've seen, especially in the last 3 years, because we've had people like Riptide Rails, that's a great company, Aves, and these people who finally found the kind of micro commerce in 3D guns, and they found a way to not get in trouble with Polymer 80, you know what I mean, by kind of ripping off some of their stuff. And it's like, okay, all these little things are bubbling up, and now we've seen things like FGC9 kits and KC9 kits, and Invader Zip is doing kits. So it's like, all right, with ghostguns.com, for example, one of our properties, okay, we'll help sell you kit parts or 3D kits, partial kits. Okay, but you want some files. Those files are at DefCAD. Okay, you're getting files at DefCAD, but I need a platform. Well, I'll buy a printer or I'll buy a CNC machine. So these things do all kind of reinforce each other. There's at least a triangle of commercialization happening. And that's really interesting. It wasn't working that way just even like 3 years ago. So I'm seeing things still accelerate despite the heavy hand of the regulator.
Yep, and that is, I think a lot more people, like I know people who had never bought an AR. The only one they've ever done is an 80%, and that's not because they're prohibited by law or anything like that. It's they built one because they wanted to start on hard mode. And
that's true for me. Like I never had a 1911 until I made one on the Ghost Gunner, for example. But that's not even an exotic story. Now there's people now, and this is just on the 3D printing topic. There's people whose first gun ever was one they 3D printed. I think that's amazing.
Yep, and now there's music videos like the HK Slap.
Oh yeah, watched it 2 days ago.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I like this timeline in that respect. Although we could all be better with our politics and stuff. I still don't think we're really emotionally prepared for all the difficulty ahead. But that's okay. There's time.
I would have to say I agree with you. And again, this is something they're never going to stop coming at. And the reason why the ghost gun has always scared them so much, the 80% and 0%, is because now we're at a point where 10 years ago, if you were going to build an 80% AR, you had to like have access to a mill or a heavy duty drill press and like have a little bit of a background and know what you were doing. And then what was it? Ares Arms back in the day had their polymer, and they were the ones that had the first batch they had a different color polymer in the trigger pocket because it was 2-color, and it was, oh no, you can do it with a router, and when you get into the other color, that's when you went far enough or too far. And they got busted by the ATF for producing, the finished receivers or something like that. It was,
Yeah, I remember that. I know I'm still friendly with Dimitri. They never ended up actually having to pay the price for that. ATF kind of let it all go, right? Because it was just too new. But they did steal a bunch of their inventory and everything,
yep,
as they do. But yeah, like that was ATF's first attempt at understanding like what they would call remanufacture or something. So, well, then you made it a gun already, and then you kind of backfilled it. So, you already crossed the threshold. That was their theory of it. And now their theory in the new rule is, well, even if any type of indication, like if I ship you honestly, one way to read the rule is if I ship you that block of aluminum you saw on my site, but I also ship like a piece of paper, that indicates where to cut. Now I've crossed some invisible line, so that's
yep.
They want to kill jigs. They want to kill anything in combination with jigs, anything with markings. Pretty aggressive.
Well, there's a guy a couple months ago that got in trouble because he was selling. It was a metal card, like a business card almost, that had scribed on it for a lightning link.
The lightning link guy. God, and then there was a YouTuber that was supporting him, CMR Fire.
Yep. CMR or something like that.
And God damn, he's in trouble right now too. And you just reminded me of it. He needs.
I didn't watch it, but I saw something pop up yesterday that it's all done now. Did
he take a deal? What did he do?
No, they fought it, and he ended up not getting in any trouble because it was one of those, no, this is art. Prove to me that,
Okay, good. Yeah, that it needed to be fought that way because what? Just a card with an outline on it? I mean, give me a break. That's practically what I'm talking about here today. That's not the thing. There's the thing, and there are the plans for the thing, and those have to be different creatures under the law.
Yeah, and I'm a mechanical person, and I have gun blueprints up as artwork, and it's
and there's already huge precedent. I mean, dude, there's a ton of Cold War precedent in the law with the Supreme Court and all this other crazy stuff. I mean, they were putting, these weird progressive groups were putting up plans for the H-bomb, in magazines and stuff, and they were getting away with it, and the Supreme Court was endorsing it. And now somehow we're acting like this is like the worst thing ever that we're sharing gun blueprints on the internet. We have got to get past this.
Yep.
And look, I'm willing to stand here and fight it, but I don't know if I want to throw another 10 years at it. But if that's what it takes, we have to get past it.
Yeah, and that is 100% factual. And you have been fighting that fight on the front lines. So we thank you for that very much.
I think, the tough thing with these federal courts, they won't give you unless you have really good facts. So, okay, anytime I'm going to have really good standing, I'll take the bait. I hate losing all the money, but standing is golden, and you shouldn't pass up. That's why we should thank JSD, by the way. When they got that the other day, and they swatted that down pretty good. But it's like people don't want to take the opportunity; they don't want to fuck up their business and stuff. So standing's a rare thing. If you get it, think about it. Take the hit for the team and try to move the ball.
Yep, that's definitely a way to do it. So where can they find you? We've already talked about ghostgunner.com, DefCAD. Where can they go to find your stuff, Cody?
Our big social media right now is ghostguns.com on Twitter. People are liking that account. Probably our biggest social media account. You can join DefCAD right now. You can buy Ghost Gunner. We have tons of mailing lists, at DefCAD and ghostguns.com. So I'm mostly spread across those properties, and I hope to not do more than that. But like I mentioned, California will begin regulating precursor parts soon, so you may see some more from us on that front.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming on. We've been on about an hour, and I know that it's getting late for you guys. So, moving on with things to do. do you have anything else you wanna say to the listeners or anyone before we start wrapping it up for the night?
I'm good. I appreciate the invite. You know, if we end up doing the 0% pistol in a couple months, let me know if you guys want to talk about it, and we'll do it.
Oh yeah,
Great.
that sounds great. Garth, you got anything to add?
Well, Bud, it's I haven't been on the show in like a month, so my morale's been a little low. But it brings that up when I visit my favorite website, Patriot Patch, patriotpatch.co. They've got pop culture patches, Patriot patches, video game patches. They've got cleaning mats, which I know you love to use as mouse pads. So if anyone is out there and they're looking for a patch to fill in their patch wall, check out Patriot Patch, patriotpatch.co.
That's right. Tyler, you got anything to add?
I can't even follow that. That's Jesus. No, I am good. Cody, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate everything that you're doing, and love the stuff. My Ghost Gunner actually got delivered about a week before I left for the Army. So I'm looking to play with it here when I get back in another week.
No, one day soon, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. No, I appreciate the support, guys. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And Garth, where can they find us at if they're looking to get a hold of us so we can put people in contact with other stuff, or tell them where to find things?
Absolutely. They can find us at AR15 Podcast 2.0 at gmail.com, AR15 Podcast 2.0 on Instagram, AR15 Podcast on Facebook, and we are on YouTube as well. Also, check out the network itself. You can find all our affiliate programs there. And don't forget, one of our favorite ones is True Shot. Right now, I know ammo is a big topic of discussion, and one of our affiliates is True Shot Ammo. They have some amazing deals through brass and steel, whichever you guys prefer. Go check those guys out. And yeah, it's a great time.
Yep, it doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps out the show a little bit. So with that, you folks out there, you stay safe and stay armed.